VocalEye Almost Live Zoom, Project Fireflower, hosted by Amy Amantea with special guests Collin van Uchelen and Carmen Papalia.
So I want to officially welcome you all to VocalEye's Almost Live event. My name is Amy Amantea. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for VocalEye. I'm also the host of these events and privileged to be with you every Wednesday evening. And I'm a member of the blind community, which it also feels like a great privilege to me. And before we move on with our programming tonight, I want to welcome Deanna into the space, who is interning with VocalEye from Adler University, and she's going to offer our land acknowledgement this evening. So Deanna, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everybody. My name is Deanna Gestrin. As Amy said, I'm an intern at VocalEye this year, and I'm always so grateful to be given this space to share with you. My family is from the Statliam Nation near Lillooet, BC, on my mother's side, and European descent on my father's side. VocalEye is presenting to you today from the ancestral, unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish First Nations. It's important that we acknowledge and honor these nations to show our deep appreciation and respect for them as individuals and communities. Also, just to honor that they are the original caretakers of the land. And I say caretakers because the relationship with First Nations people to the land is so important. To this day, it's still just a really cherished bond that people live their lives in connection always with other people in their families, in their communities, but also to the land. I'd like to share a bit of history about our local First Nations with you all today. The Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations have lived on this territory for hundreds of years. After first contact with Europeans in the 1700s, a smallpox epidemic unfortunately devastated the populations along the northwest coast. And contact with European settlers began as sailors entered the Burrard Inlet. I wasn't actually aware of that. So as I was researching to talk to you tonight, I thought that's really interesting. And I tried to imagine what it would be like to be on the land and see this boat coming up to the Burrard Inlet. You know, what would that have been like? So many questions, so many thoughts. And I think as we learn about First Nations culture and history and the history in Canada and the US, I think it's important to try to place yourself in those spaces sometimes and really think, like, what would that have been like? What would that have felt like? Settlers continued to come into the area through the mid-1800s, brought here by the gold rush. And that also displaced the local First Nation communities. Diseases such as influenza, the measles, tuberculosis were also introduced at that time, having further detrimental effects, and small designated plots of land that we know as reservations were also assigned by the government at this time. So that forced Indigenous communities to reside on these small and sometimes undesirable plots of land. At the time, this felt like protection because the world had changed so much for these populations. But ultimately, what happened is it became a way to control and restrict, and that those reservations are still in effect today. Compulsory attendance at church and government-run residential schools was enforced by the government and by the church, and this threatened to break up families and abolish Indigenous culture. And this history is grim. It's not comfortable, even for me as part of the culture and mixed heritage. It's not comfortable to talk about these things, but I think that's precisely why it's important to talk about these things. So assimilation practices occurred in Canada very similarly to the United States. And it's important that we tell the stories and that we share this truth. And also that we celebrate that despite a few hundred years of oppression the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations are thriving communities that are rich with culture and traditional practices. Families are growing up and they are continuing to learn and share their knowledge. The knowledge keepers are giving that information to the younger generations. And so this is really restorative work that's happening. And what can we do? We can have these conversations and we can be an ear, we can be open-minded, we can ask questions. I think those are really important steps to take towards truth and reconciliation in Canada, but also in North America. I would like to lift my hands to you. And when I do this each week, I am lifting my hands facing towards my face, bent 90 degrees at the elbow, with flat palms facing forward toward myself at eye level. And I say to you, all my relations. I also want to invite you in your own space, if you'd like to, when you hear this kind of, this sort of greeting, all my relations, or kind of the ending of a conversation, you can feel free to put your hands in this position also. And that's just to kind of greet me in the same way. I say all my relations to acknowledge that we are all relatives. We're all related. Thank you so much, Amy, for bringing me to the space to share some words with you tonight. And I hope you all have a fantastic holiday fanfare before we take probably a much deserved and needed rest.
Thank you, Deanna. I mean, it feels redundant almost for me to say that every week I learn so much from what you share, and I honor that so much. So thank you again for just providing the context and sharing the culture and providing us with that lens. I think that's really important as part of the discussion.
My pleasure. Thanks, Amy.
Mm-hmm. Friends, it's Wednesday, December the 15th, 2021, and tonight we're proud to offer you our Almost Live event, number 67. Oh, these numbers are getting so big, I can't even count anymore. But tonight we're going to share with you Project Fireflower. So we've got two guests in the space, and I want to just bring them right on in. So we've got Collin van Uchelen with us and Carmen Papalia. So welcome to the two of you. Thanks for being in the space. There we go. We've got 3 squares. I see 3 squares. Friends, let's just maybe start off, Collin and Carmen, because there's folks in the space that are local that we may know from our local community, but there we have folks joining us from all over Turtle Island, Canada, from all over the USA. So Collin, let's start with you. Just, tell us a bit about who you are so that folks get to be familiar with another community member.
Thank you, Amy, and lovely to be here. My name's Collin van Uchelen. I am someone who is blind or has been sighted and has lost my eyesight over time. I have retinitis pigmentosa. And I am in a room here in my own home, or the place where I live. I have a guide dog who's sitting on the floor to my left, a golden retriever named Rico. And I am, by training, a community psychologist. I've done quite a bit of work and consulting work in that area. And alongside of that, I've always had this burning desire to learn about fireworks. And I've been an appreciator of fireworks my whole life. And so in the course of time, I've become more and more interested in fireworks, even though I can't see them very well anymore. And so I'm now beginning to identify myself also as a pyrotechnical artistic designer. And so it's lovely to be here. I use the pronouns he and him and his. My heritage is Dutch, white skin, and it's great to be a part of this evening tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Collin. Carmen, my friend.
Hi, Carmen speaking here. I am a non-visual artist. So I started making art in 2010, and it in a medium that's called social practice. Basically, what that means is I do work with people, and the art that I create requires participation. I address my own access in my work. So both in my experience of being a non-visual learner, as well as my experience of severe chronic and episodic pain. So I've had a pain condition that's pretty serious since I was a kid. And I think my time in hospital and advocating for myself in the medical system has really informed my perspective on accessibility. And that's what I explore in my artwork most of the time. I do a lot of performance work and installation work. One of my performances involves me replacing my cane with different things that I use to navigate unfamiliar places. One of those, I ditch my cane for a marching band that I use as my navigation system to find my way through the city. I'm smiling as I say that. I use he, him, his pronouns. I have olive skin and black hair. I get that from my mom, who is Greek with roots in Turkey. My grandparents immigrated here from Greece and Italy, actually. So I'm pleased to be here. And yeah, just thanks for having me.
Awesome. Really excited to dive into this work. So tell me a bit about, first of all, this exhibition was presented at the Grunt Gallery, which is local to the Vancouver area. Maybe give our listeners some context about, when, like how long the exhibition ran and where exactly the Grunt Gallery is located in our city. I don't know, Collin, you want to start?
Sure. The exhibition opened up October 1st and continued until December 12th. And this was located at a small gallery where the Project Fireflower show, which was all about fireworks, was the only show on display in the whole gallery. It's located on East 2nd Avenue. It's right on the number 84 bus route and just a little bit to the east of Maine. And it was, it's one of those galleries where you can walk in. There's no admission fee. It's very low key. It's very serene. And it was an exhibition that allowed visitors time to really explore the display and to take their time to navigate the area, to touch all the different elements of the display, because everything was designed from the ground up to be accessible by touch to people who wanted to experience it in a tactile form, visually for those with eyesight, and all spaces in between. It was also designed to be accessible to those with who are deaf or hard of hearing, and so it was one of those kind of serene, thoughtful displays. And it's interesting, I'm smiling at myself to say that it's serene because it's about fireworks, which are known to be so loud and impactful. And it was really in this display that we took the look of fireworks and sort of slowed things down and froze the light in time, so that it really gave visitors a chance to experience and to explore the shape and the structures of the different fireworks that were on display.
And where did the concept of this come from? Carmen?
Well, yeah, I can jump in a little bit. So
okay, jump in here, Carmen. Yeah.
If that's okay, Collin, is that okay?
Yeah. We'll give you both time to talk about this. Don't you worry.
Okay, cool. Well, in 2019, like I said, I think that was the last. Or no, I was talking to you all in the tech check.
Oh yeah, that was the tech check-in.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so in 2019, I actually participated in the Fingerworks for Fireworks. So that was the experience that Collin had worked on with VocalEye and a few folks, Steph included, in developing this method for translating fireworks through description and also these like hand articulations on the recipient's back or hand or arm. So it's this multi-sensory experience of the fireworks, and it's live during the celebration of light at English Bay. So after that experience, I was just so moved. I was sitting next to Amy actually
Yes, we
that
were.
that night, and I was just like, it was unlike anything I had ever experienced. And usually, I work with a lot of museums, so usually as someone who's non-visual, like they will offer me like maybe one of three predetermined options for participation, and that's sometimes like an audio tour, sometimes there's like a tactile element and or texture sample that you can touch to get a sense of what the thing you can't see looks like or is, what it's made of. And so with, with Fingerworks, I just was so moved because I felt like what the experience that I was being given, it really transcended the thing that it was providing access to. I really felt the fireworks through my body, literally, because there was someone like, making these tactile impressions on my back. But it really was like this. I really thought like an example of accessibility that goes beyond an accommodation. So
It's
after
an
that
art form
experience,
all on its own a bit.
for sure, yes, and I love the fact that it had come out of Collin's like love for that fireworks experience and wanting to stay connected to this annual festival, the Celebration of Light. So after that experience, I started getting to know Collin more, and we just started talking more and more, and realizing like I learned about Collin's passion for fireworks, and I really just wanted to support him in his artistic journey. And I so happened to have some Canada Arts Council funding that I needed to use on a project. COVID had just kind of happened, and the project that I was working on, which I was working on with a collaborator who's the curator of the show, Whitney Mashburn. We have this long-running collaboration called Let's Keep in Touch, and it's about tactility in the museum. So me and Whitney approached Collin, and we were working with a local designer named Michael Liss, who has a studio in Vancouver. And we just kind of started talking about the various things that we could make that represented fireworks in a tactile way, and started talking about levels of translation. And then we went on so many different tangents, all beginning with visits to local botanical gardens so we could touch flowers, which I think Collin could probably talk more about. Or
I think what we've got to do, friends, is bring up our first image and talk through those, and then we'll continue this discussion about how the project came along as we go through the slides. Because I want people to see this as we're talking about it. I think it's really important to bring the context together. So Rick, will you bring up slide number 1 for us? And Rick's going to bring that up. So Collin, I know you're going to describe this to us, but this is sort of what we would experience as we enter the gallery, right? So there's a table set up and panels on the wall, but tell us what it is we're experiencing here in the gallery.
Yeah, so you're entering the one big common open room in the gallery, and in front of you there's a high, long tabletop called a plinth, and this has a variety of objects on it, including some flower stems that reveal something about the specific shape that fireworks might take in flight or on their way up in the air. And there's a variety of objects. There's in addition to the chrysanthemum and dahlia and peony flower stems, which are classic firework shapes. We have some things that show how some fireworks will twist or spiral when they're raising up in the air. We have a corkscrew and a slinky to kind of reveal that type of shape. And we have a copper structural model of a chrysanthemum firework shell starburst, which I will talk more about a little bit later in the presentation, but it really shows how that goes. And so that table, we see that in the foreground in this image. And beyond the table on the wall, we see a variety of 2-foot square panels, and each of these is made out of acrylic. and they show a particular firework image as if caught in time or captured in time, and it's illuminated. So those with any light perception can see the streaks of the fireworks themselves. We have 9 panels in total, featuring 7 different fireworks shell effects, and I'll speak to that over the next couple of slides. To the left in the gallery, which this is not seen in this image here, is also a display showing an arrangement of fireworks as if they were going off in the sky all at the same time. And these are all shown by using plants and grasses to kind of give some shape to the forms that the fireworks would take. And so this is the main room in Grunt Gallery for the Project Fireflower exhibition. There's text on the wall that describes the names of the different displays, who was involved, an acknowledgement list. And then in the back of the gallery, there was a smaller media room where we did have a video display that would show a documentary about fireworks that was drawn from different clips taken from different countries across the world, as well as several fireworks shows that were synchronized to music performed by a local pyrotechnical team called Celebration Fireworks. So I think that gives you a bit of the lay of the land. What we'll do in the slides that are forthcoming is take a closer look at the tactile panels and how they're designed and how we interact with them, as well as the tableau, which is the scene using all the different plants.
And just before we do that, Carmen, because you were talking about an artist fabricator that was helping put together these panels, and Collin, you talk about the panels being illuminated, and I'm just wondering, how are they illuminated? How, you know?
Okay,
maybe you can share a bit about how that works.
Yeah, we work with this company in Vancouver in East Van, like about 5-minute walk from where I am right now, called Associated Plastics, and they make all manner of thing out of plastics, mostly acrylic. So they do a lot of like engraving work with a router, which is just like, you know, kind of carves a groove out of the material. So we have these like slick kind of plastic panels with grooves in them that are made with like this U-shaped kind of drill head that a machinist is actually like moving across the material. And it took like quite a bit of work of working with, Collin worked with an artist who's an animator and an illustrator named Leanne Zanier. And she was pulling references of different fireworks, the images, some of documentary photography of fireworks, and then some that were computer generated, to kind of like land on an image that was both like visually appealing and also like appealing from a tactile perspective as well. And there was a lot of kind of guesswork, I guess, within this process, because we were working between, you know, a visual producer, the animator, Collin, the lead designer and artist, who
and dreamer.
Yes, who conceptualized these objects, and then the folks working at the Associated Plastics who knew like how to achieve these kinds of forms, like through the machinery that they had available.
And is there actually a light behind them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and okay. that was so each of these panels, because of their acrylic, they and just in the way that they're routered and with the grooves in them, they pick up light that is kind of projected from like around the perimeter of the panel. So there's actually an LED strip underneath the frames. So it's kind of like this gap within the frame that the LED strip rests, and then there's like a control to manipulate the color and the frequency of it flashing. I mean, we have them on constantly with no blinking lights in the colors that represent the actual fireworks shells. So that's kind of the gist behind the colors and light.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'd like to add just a little bit to that because when I was thinking about this, I wanted these panels to be both tactilely accessible through touch and visually perceptible through eyesight. And so the idea of using the illumination, it's a little bit like how light works in a fiber optic cable. It's actually carried through the plane of the acrylic panel itself. And so when you cut into that with the engraving, that those cuttings catch that light. And so that's the part that becomes visible, whereas the rest of it stays dark. And so that it was that approach and thinking through how that could occur, and then varying the depth of the engraving. Then I was thinking, well, that might vary the intensity of the light. That would bring it a little bit more in line with how fireworks, are like brighter at the tips than they are in the streaks of light behind the tips. And so it was a very thought intensive process, and we had very little chance to experiment, just given the enormity of the project and the production cost involved. And so
Right.
But I think, as you will see, it turned out pretty good.
So we're going to bring up the image number 2, which is the chrysanthemum firework, one of these tactile panels that you're referring to. And so Collin,
Yeah,
you're
this
gonna
is
talk
my
us through this.
favorite panel. This one came out so nicely.
And
So-
I'm going to just, sorry, before you go on, I'm going to ask Rick to just expand it a little bit. That's great, Rick. Okay, go ahead,
You're
Collin.
good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to describe this panel, and I'm also going to describe the firework that this panel shows. So this particular effect is called a chrysanthemum shell. In the sky, it's spherical. And what happens is you have a fireworks shell that gets launched from the ground level, or the barge if it's on English Bay. The shell rises up and then it explodes at elevation, at a predetermined height. And that explosion is what's called a hard break. So it's a powerful blast that breaks the shell apart. Now, the shell might be like a sphere, about the size of a cantaloupe, for example, or a huge apple, or about there. They might range from 3 to 6, 8 inches in diameter. When this thing breaks, it emits these pieces that are called the stars, and they ignite on fire and they burn, and they go out in all different directions simultaneously. So that gives this firework shell burst pattern its shape. That's why it looks like a spike or a ball of spikes of light. And there could be up to 100 stars in a single chrysanthemum shell. The interesting thing that they do is when these stars are moving away from the center burst point, each of them leaves behind it a streak of light that remains visible for quite some time. And so it essentially ends up looking, for those who have had vision, it might look like a dandelion that has gone to seed at the end of the summer. It's just it's a globe made up of all these spikes going out, and at the end of the effect, the stars may twinkle briefly, or flash, or even change color at the very end, and then everything goes out suddenly. So what you see here in front of you in this particular image is that kind of a three-dimensional shape captured in a two-dimensional form. So that's as if it were a photograph. And what we've done here is we have these grooves that you can run your finger in. Each of these grooves here in this image is 1/8 of an inch wide. And you start from the center burst point, and you can just trace your fingers going out in all directions to the side. And you can feel what each of these streaks of light, or the tracers of light, would look like if this were, say, captured in a time exposure photograph in the firework, or if you could visually see it. And remember, you're seeing something that is 3D, but you usually only see it in 2 dimensions.
Right. And Collin, just maybe tell us a bit about, because with my low vision, the background is very, very dark, and the color appears to me to be, I can't quite tell if that's a shade of pinkish or.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's pink. Okay.
This is, it's on a black background, and it's a pretty vibrant pink.
It actually kind of reminds me of Christmas lights, like vibrance of holiday lights.
Yeah, it's fairly intense. I have the LED illumination turned up to its brightest level, that we could do while maintaining the high contrast with the background, just to optimize its visibility for those who had light perception.
And if I was witnessing this, would I be able to change that contrast, or is it preset by you all as the artists?
Well, like each of the panels is set with a remote control, which is, it's not exactly accessible. I would say it's less user friendly than I had hoped for. So
gotcha.
It's tricky. They are changeable, but for the course of the exhibition, we just kept them at colors that were appropriate colors to those kind of firework effects too.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Carmen, anything you'd like to add about this particular panel before we move on to the next image? Knowing that we'd like to have a Q&A with y'all at the end.
Yeah, I wanted to just say that each of these panels were also accompanied with this audio device that was a can. It was kind of like this, as big as maybe, I don't know, small can of peanuts or something.
Like a tuna can.
A tuna can. Yeah. There you go. That you pull off the wall, and it has a magnetic trigger on it. So when you pull it off the wall, it plays an audio, and it's Collin's voice and describing the firework that's represented in the panel. And so you can listen to the course of the lifespan. Collin describes the lifespan of the firework effect, and you can kind of follow along with your fingertips on the panel. So each of the panels was paired with an audio device, each describing each panel.
Cool. So you got to hear the description and feel the description at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Cool stuff. All right, I think let's take a look at the peony tactile panel. So same concept as the first tactile panel, but this is a different firework. So Collin, I'm just gonna get, Rick's gonna magnify. Awesome. Okay. What is this?
This is a peony, another of the classic fire flowers. And the peony, similar to the chrysanthemum, is a spherical shell burst pattern. So also it rises up. You have this hard break explosion in the air, and then all the stars come out going in every possible direction. Again, you can have up to 100 or more stars. But what makes it different than a chrysanthemum is that the stars in the peony, they expand rapidly, but they don't leave any streak of light behind them. So it would be like as if you had a ball or a balloon that was rapidly expanding, and the surface of that balloon just had little points of light that got farther and farther and farther apart very quickly, and then the whole thing would go out. So what we did with the peony here, rather than showing it with streaks, then we just have these little dots that are almost like little drill holes in the surface of the panel. Each of those lights up with red light, and it shows the distribution of these points of light on the surface of this imaginary sphere or ball. This is in the peony. It was interesting in that exhibition because we wanted to keep the depiction of it sort of true to how it would actually look. We showed it in 3 different stages of its lifespan. And in this particular slide, we show the largest size of it, but it's a similar pattern, same number of dots. It starts small, gets to a medium size, gets to the largest size, and then the whole thing blinks out.
Cool. I'm curious, Collin, and you don't have to answer this if this is too personal, but you were talking about your love of fireworks, and I wonder, like with the high contrast, can you make out the images?
You know, with the brightest ones, I still can see a little bit. And, you know, for me, that going to the celebration of light, it was actually kind of like also this celebration of my eyesight in some way, because with RP, my sight loss was incremental, and each year it's like, I see a little bit less. But I think also for someone like me, it doesn't get any better than fireworks because they're high contrast, they're flashing, and they're moving. And it's like, okay, if I'm going to see anything, it's going to be something that looks like a firework.
Your best chance, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
How about for you, Carmen? Can you explain to us a bit about how you interpret these panels, whether that's with any partial
Yeah,
sight or just tactily?
yeah, I do enjoy the tactile experience of them for sure. I do have a little bit of light perception and shape perception. So, whether I'm watching the fireworks, the brightest ones I might see as like a blurry apparition kind of in the sky. But yeah, without detail. So it really is like a blurry kind of like painting maybe that's animated, and same with these panels. I can sort of pick out the shape or get a sense of the shape, but not all of them. Like some of them are like the peony that we just looked at. The dots are a little like scattered and small, so it's difficult for me to pick up.
Yeah, I found when we looked at the chrysanthemum, like from my perception of contrast, needing contrast, that one was really vivid for me, and I felt like I got a really good representation of that. But again, I struggle a little bit with the peony too, because it is for me more like a blurred patch of light. So I miss the details in my my sense of non-visual experience. So yeah, thank you for sharing the context, because I think it's kind of nice as community members to be able to share how we're interpreting this art as well. Any last thoughts on this one before we bring up the next one?
Nope. I'd say move on.
All right, so image number 4 that Rick's going to bring up, which is this image of Collin, you touching the shell of shells firework tactile panel. So first you're going to explain to us what that is. Okay, I'm just going to leave it in your hands, my friend, because you know what's going on here.
All right, so here in this particular slide, it shows both the panel, and these panels are 2 feet by 2 feet square, so they're good size. And I'm in front of it, and I'm touching it, and what I'm doing with my fingertips is I'm tracing the trajectories of light that this firework creates. And so each of these grooves it's like a little channel, similar to what would be made in wood by ants or some kind of termites, that kind of thing, these little groove or pathways. And the shell of shells is a particularly interesting firework effect, because as this thing rises up, the shell will break or burst, and similar to how it does in chrysanthemum and peony, but out of it doesn't break with as much explosive energy. And so out come other stars, and these stars start to arc outward and droop down in these graceful arches. And so what this panel it's depicting that. So you have the central shell burst kind of in the upper middle section. Out come all these streaks of light that are arcing downward. And then just when you think the whole thing is over, those stars break open again, and then they replicate that same pattern. So you have more stars that come out, and each of those arcs again and starts to drip downward. So the overall effect is somewhat like a spider plant. For those of you who are familiar with how a spider plant grows, it has your central area where most of the energy is. You have these long tendrils that come out, and then you have these little clusters of leaves on the bottom. And so
I almost see palm trees when I look at it.
Yeah, it
like
is.
Loopy palm trees, yeah.
It's similar, and it shows you. It's a good comment, good observation, Amy, because it shows how well the forms of plants kind of replicate or represent these kind of, the lifespan of a firework itself. It's kind of like the lifespan of a plant, frozen in time.
Hence the title, Project Fire Flower.
Hence the title, and hence one of the primary forms that we used in the exhibition to represent how this light does move and take shape.
And this one, if I'm making out the color, it's a greenish kind of color.
It's kind of a greenish yellow color. Yeah.
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 Really, again, very nicely bolded, high contrast. image, which is
Yeah,
very,
when
very
when it
cool.
comes to contrast, that kind of greenish yellow on black, that's as
Yeah.
good as it gets, I think.
Well, you know, yellow is the easiest color to see amongst all folks on the sight loss spectrum. So
There you go. Yeah.
I think that maybe, you know, it's pretty vivid for a reason.
This is a very rare shell. I've only seen it a few times in my life. When I saw it, it was a bright whitish silver, and it was stunningly beautiful. It was as if it was moving in slow motion, and it just was mesmerizing.
Why is it a rare shell? What makes it so rare?
It's complicated because you have one shell, the main shell of the effect, and inside of it you have to pack other shells that do that same effect, but a bunch of them on a smaller scale. And then all that timing has to be worked out, so the complexity of it, so that it breaks and everything opens up, you know, at the same time is fairly sophisticated.
And I imagine it's probably quite expensive too, considering all of those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. You got that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real treat when you see them.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Carmen, what would you like to add to this?
I think I'd like to go into the next image, and I know which one it is. And
All right. Let's do that then. So Rick's going to bring up image number 5. So this is Carmen, you touching the Dahlia firework. So
yeah, so
go ahead.
I'll talk about touching the Dahlia, but not necessarily the panel. I'll talk about our experience that led to a lot of these objects. And this was early on, like maybe at the beginning of the pandemic. I coordinated these visits to botanical gardens in Vancouver, both Van Dusen Garden and Stanley Park. I had heard that Collin early on had worked with his visual assistant Maureen and found just like different things in her garden that represented fireworks and around the house too, like the spider plant, etc. And I had learned from Collin that you know, the dahlia, peony, chrysanthemum, these are all flowers that have inspired firework shells. So I had thought, like, let's go to a botanical garden and continue this practice of like, what can we find that represents a firework? And so we asked like a gardener named Ange at Van Dusen Gardens to give her a list of the kinds of things we wanted to see or touch, I guess, in this case. And then she also brought us some other plants or 2 other plants that she felt really represented fireworks too. And we did the same thing at Stanley Park as well. At Van Dusen, though, we discovered the allium plant, which is in the garlic family, and it just has like this big kind of pom-pom at the top. It's kind of like a globe burst firework, kind of very, very similar. Collin, would you say to like a peony, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. So then that was a good, nice discovery from Van Dusen, and then from Stanley Park, we actually went to see the Dahlia display there. So this was when was this, 2020? I don't remember. Anyways, we went there, and it was the first time they had a Dahlia display, and it was planted by the gardener that showed us around named Frankie. And it was the whole display was inspired by the Dahlia display at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, which Frankie had seen, and then proposed to the Parks Department to represent at Stanley Park. So that day we got to feel all sorts of varieties of Dahlia, and also a bunch of different grasses that Collin really thought referred to the way certain fireworks break. There was this one variety of grass called the Jasper papyrus, and it also kind of, I think we were thinking it did the same kind of thing as the shell of shells almost. Is that right, Collin?
Yeah, you've nailed it, Carmen, because those grasses really, they show from the base, and you can touch them. You can follow that stem. You can follow it arc. And then you hit to the point where it might break into multiple smaller stems, and you trace them, and then they have their seed pods or kind of end in a little bit fuzzy shape, and it's the perfect representation of that growth of the lifespan of the firework. The difference is that the grass might take, you know, a few months to grow that big, and a firework will take a few seconds. And
Right.
so
And so
it's
this is
nice to
a
be able to kind of capture that
Mhm.
in physical form.
And so this is a representation that I'm touching of the dahlia firework, and you know, inspired by the dahlia flower. Do you want to just give a really
Yeah, let's see
like,
describe what the panel looks like.
yeah. I can't I actually
Colin,
have
that's
to admit
probably you.
Yeah.
I forget.
So the dahlia, this is an interesting firework, and it's also spherical like the peony and chrysanthemum, and yet the stars are bigger and brighter, and so there are fewer stars. And so we've depicted that here in the panel. This one's rendered in pink, just like the chrysanthemum panel was. And the engraving then of the grooves of this are much wider than they were in the chrysanthemum panel. So you can run your finger along that. And then at the very end, there's a little bit of a circle at the very tip that kind of droops down a little bit. And so that shows you where the burning star would be of the dahlia firework shell. Now, because the dahlia has these bigger stars, they also sort of travel farther than many of the other, the chrysanthemum and peony. And so you'll start to see those kind of, the moving stars arc downward. The farther away they get from the center burst, the more they're pulled down by gravity. Sometimes a dahlia leaves these visible streaks behind them, as is depicted here. And sometimes they have the bald stars, which are what are depicted in the peony, so you wouldn't see those streaks behind them at all. But for this particular panel, we went with the visible streaks of light behind the stars. And this was the first panel we created out of the set.
Wow.
It also shows here Carmen listening to the sound canister. So while he's touching the panel, he's also listening to my voice describe how that dahlia shell shape is characterized in how it bursts in air.
And I was just going to say that it was very satisfying to like follow the streak of light down to its end point, which is this like little circle that you could kind of just put your fingertip in. I don't know. It was a nice little end point kind of destination for that touch experience.
And what's the impact with listening to the description and doing the touching at the same time, Carmen? What was that like for you?
You know, I mean, it's funny to say it, but like it reminded me of Fingerworks almost, because you were getting a description, and then it was multi-sensory, and I really do feel like it kind of it requires you to be in sort of a meditative space where you're actually like listening intentionally, and then like kind of making an intentional motion. I think it's hard for us to focus on what we're observing when it comes to art, and especially like tactile art. We don't usually like make. I mean, we do as a community. I think we're feeling things all the time, but I think for like a critical kind of assessment of an object, like I really enjoyed being guided through it by what the descriptions Collin was offering, and I don't know, it just really worked as an experience.
Especially objects that are almost abstract in nature, right? Unless you've experienced them somewhere, it can be really hard to wrap your brain around what it is you're feeling and what it is you're hearing. So the two things in tandem feel to me to be really a really interesting experience to bring together.
Yeah. And it was done sort of in a way too, like my voice, actually to me it sounds like I'm speaking really slow, but that was also somewhat intentional to allow people time to kind of feel those trajectories on the panels and kind of think about, okay, well, what is this shell firework actually doing? What is the form it's taking over time? And there's one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Amy, I wanted to note about these panels. Each one underneath it, at the left-hand edge of the panel, it has the name of that firework effect written in a high contrast standard text. And then it also has the same name written out in a jumbo braille label that were made specifically for this. And the reason I chose jumbo braille is I wanted to invite sighted viewers to take a look at the braille characters, and this was grade 1 uncontracted braille, and it was almost like the label was designed to kind of say, hey, touch me, and to allow people the chance to kind of compare the letters in the braille label with what they might see if they were sighted in the text label above it.
Right. I'm curious about, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this in the Q&A portion, but just laying this foundation, and you can answer it now, which is, so where do these panels live now? Like, is there a website where people can go and check them out other than just, the gallery stuff, or like listen to your recordings of the description, those kinds of things?
I in my possession have the high resolution images of each of the panels, and then we do have the sound recording files that would be verbal, as well as I have the text because I wrote up the descriptions for each of those. And so my hope is to kind of amalgamate all this information together in one central site. And we also have the presentation that was made at the gallery about it with sort of a bit of a virtual tour as well. So,
and what happens to the actual physical panels?
The panels are right now that everything's being uninstalled in the gallery, and then they'll come into my care until the next time we put them up.
Okay, good to know.
And yeah, there may be an audio tour that we can share too with folks if they're interested too. That was written and read, and is a audio descriptive tour of the whole show. So we can follow up with that stuff. And
yeah, that's not material I was given to share afterwards, but we do have some links of some artist talks and some things like that, podcasts that cool. will circulate afterwards, so folks can take a deeper dive on their own if they would like to do that.
Yeah, my guess is that this is not the last time that these panels will see the well, I was going to say the light of day, but
the light of night, the light of day.
Yeah, that's right. They'll see the dark of night. So so I'll certainly put the word out when they come out again.
Please, yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on to the next photo, which is the pyrotechnical tableau.
Okay. So this slide, there's a lot on the go here, so I'm going to talk you through it, and I'm just going to say a few words about how pyrotechnicians design a display of the caliber that we have here at English Bay at the Celebration of Light. So typically what they do is they think of a number of different effects simultaneously that would occur at different elevations in the sky. So similar to how you would design maybe a painting or any kind of a scene where you have different levels or different components, they might use different colors and different shapes at these different elevations. And so what I've done here is I've created that kind of a scene or tableau in tactile form. And what I'm using are actual replicas of plants of various shapes. And each of these plants carries the different sort of characteristics of some fireworks. So at the very base of the tableau, we have what's called a waterfall effect. And it looks a lot like a visual waterfall, and it kind of feels somewhat like a waterfall would feel because I'm using a very sort of feathery pampas grass.
Sorry, Collin, just before you go on, can you just give us an idea of the scale of this?
Yeah. Good question. This tableau, it's about just over 5 feet wide and about 5 feet tall. And the whole thing is you can touch it, you can put sort of both your hands into it as you go. Mm-hmm. So at the base we have this waterfall effect, and the waterfall is coming out of a series of firework launching mortars. So these are the actual tubes that really get used in a real fireworks show to launch the shells up into the air. And these were lent to us for the duration of the exhibition by Celebration Fireworks here in town.
Wow.
And so we have 2-inch mortars in the front, and there's 20 of these black tubes kind of all side by side. They're banded together in steel racks. We have these things that look like dog tails or cat tails cascading over the front as if it was water flowing over the front. And then rising up out of those, we have 8 star mines, and these are like clumps of grass, really, like a cluster of meadow grass that shows how the different firework stars will emanate outward and start to curve. And then arising from behind that in a set of larger 3-inch mortars, we have a series of comets. And the comets are like shooting stars, and they have a long, fuzzy, thick, furry tail, and then a bright, colorful head on the very tip of them. So we've depicted that here with large pampas grass, which again is like dog tail. So it has a really feathery, furry feel, just like the sparkles of a comet tail. And then we have pincushion flowers at the very top to depict the burning part of the comet as it rises up. Often you'll see these crisscross or be in a kind of diagonal shape so that they intersect as they're flying, and we've depicted that here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Above all of that, we have a series of spider plants hanging down, and which is like the shell of shells, and that's what it depicts, these multi-break compound shells which first come out, arc over. As they're trailing down, then they break again, and you get the little cluster of spider plants. And those are seated above 4-inch mortar racks, and we had 5 or 6 mortars per rack, I think, in the back. And so we have the real launching system at the base of the tableau, and then all these faux plants up above it to kind of show what the fireworks would sort of look like by touch and how they might be arranged in space.
In the space, yeah, in the sky. Thank you for that description, because without having any detailed vision of my own to rely on, you don't want to know what this looks like. It looks like a birthday cake to me.
Oh, well, that's good, Amy, because one of the fireworks effects is actually called a cake. I didn't know that.
I love it.
All these effects are coming up, and and it's just called a cake.
So it's like these what were you calling them with the shooting stars?
Yeah,
they're kind of like candles that are stuck in a cake, and then at the tops, the pieces that come out at the top are kind of like the sparklers that would come out of a cake. So they stand higher than a candle on a cake.
That's pretty good. That's pretty
good. Oh, well, there you go.
Is.
Here I thought I was being kind of silly, thinking this looked like a birthday cake and kind of yummy, but there you go. Yeah. This is what happens when you have partial sight, right? Your eyes play tricks on you.
Yeah.
It's tiered as well. Yeah.
Together too, because we're actually using the real launching systems, and this is the kind of stuff that no one really gets to see, right?
Yeah,
way on the barge or in the in visit, and you never really think about it. And so on this display, you could actually feel like, well, what does this stuff feel like? It's a little bit like the pipes of an organ, all lined up side by side, and the bigger they are in diameter, the taller they are in height.
Okay. Carmen,
with gunpowder residue is still inside of these mortars as well.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's how they came to us.
So does that mean when you touch it, you get kind of this like chalky feeling on your fingers, or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
and
interesting.
Like I cleaned them out as best I could. I think I went through a lot of my old socks doing it too. Yeah.
So we're going to bring up the last image here, which is an image of Carmen and Collin, both of you touching this pyrotechnical tableau. So maybe you can just walk us through this.
Carmen.
Yeah, I think I wanted to just describe how it felt, and yes. I believe we're interacting with the middle tier here, which is the comets. And as Collin described, there's like this pampas grass, large kind of pampas grass tail. And that for me really did feel like a furry cattail. And it really was like soft and inviting to just run your hand across. And yeah, I guess like just a fuzzy kind of, I don't know, featheriness, like Collin was saying. It was it's similar to the material that's used on the lower tier for the waterfall.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe these stalks are a little thicker on this tier with the comets. And yeah, I do like, so with me and the curator of the show, Whitney, with our project Let's Keep in Touch, we always like to collect vocabulary from people about like what words come to mind when you touch this, because we kind of, as a culture, I think we have less words to describe how something feels, because we don't
do that a lot.
We don't try to make sense of that experience in that way, and we don't dedicate time and space and resources like to the study of the tactile environment, like we do with visual culture and the visual environment. I'd say the museum is a place where that happens throughout history, where we've learned how to look critically at or assess it, at least what we're seeing. So yeah, I really was interested in maybe asking Collin what words came to mind maybe when he touched the tableau.
And just before you do that, Collin, I'm going to invite friends from the community because we're going to transition into the Q&A. So if you've got questions for Collin or Carmen or about Project Fireflower, use the raise your hand function and we'll acknowledge those questions. So Collin, go ahead and share with us what words come to mind when you touch this.
Well, it's, the feathery for the comet tails and the waterfall effect. It really was just this kind of soft, feathery sort of dusting of, and it just really, it made me imagine kind of showers of sparks trailing in effect, which is actually what those firework effects do. They're just like streams of sparks that are gently floating down, and usually silver, white, and kind of gold in colors. And so, yeah.
Do you know what the actual material was that made these tails and these waterfalls?
These are, it's a synthetic material for these. I think they're replicating the pampas grass, which would be like really fine, almost like thread-like. Like a lot of these kind of little, or not little, threads. It feels a lot like, I have a golden retriever guide dog. It feels just like his tail, Yeah, that kind of feathery, light, furry tail. And they're even called tails. In the fireworks language, they're a comet with a rising tail, or a golden tail, or a sparkling tail. Yeah.
Awesome.
These were all from these artificial flowers and plants, and the ones that were on the table that we described earlier, all from this local shop on Main Street in Vancouver called Faux Floral. And some of the plants that they have and the flowers, the blossoms that they have, really feel real. Like the petals of the flowers are treated with some kind of material or a coating that makes them feel like a real flower blossom, and it was pretty amazing. Yeah, so it's very enjoyable to just touch these some of these samples that we got for the installation.
Awesome. Well, we've got a few hands in the space, friends. Would you like to hear some questions and comments from our community audience?
Sure.
Awesome. So Megan has a hand. We'll go to Megan first, and then we'll go to Christy. So go ahead, Megan, and unmute. Give Megan a moment to unmute. Oh, we hear ya.
What?
We hear ya.
Oh, okay. That was an amazing show. That was really, really cool. So Project Fireflower, is that in Vancouver, actually? And is the exhibit still on?
It was in Vancouver, and the exhibit has now closed. It closed at the end of last week.
Oh, darn. Oh, darn. That would have been so cool.
Yeah, I know. The timing was just unfortunate. for this talk and the run of the show. But hopefully, I'll give a heads up. Should it resurface, get relaunched somewhere else, and we'll certainly put the word out again.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
And Megan, we're going to circulate some links. So if you want to hear more about how Collin and Carmen put this together, and some artist talks and some podcast stuff, we'll circulate some links in the email that goes on after this event, so you can dig through that too.
And I look at my Google too, because my Google does podcast as well.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Christy has a hand. We got a whole lineup of hands here, friends. So Christy's got a hand, and then we'll go to Tilo next. Give Christy a moment to unmute. This is Christy B.
Hi, it's Christy. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi. I just want to say, wow, when that came through in my email, Project Flower, I thought, wow, what a great, interesting show. And it ended up to be just what I thought it would be. I would love to see it live with all the water, with all the sounds and sound effects. I think it would be a wonderful show. And my question is, how long did it take you guys to actually put it all together? And if it was years or if it was just a couple months? Thank you.
Good question, Christy. Who wants to take that one?
Well, I feel like we really started digging in. I mean, it's maybe in 2020, Collin. Like
it was that summer of yeah,
summer
my
of
sense of
2019
time is altered, but it was that fall of 2020, I think, that we went to those gardens, right?
Right. Yeah. It was right before the dahlias were gone for the season,
right.
I think.
That's right. So it was the better part of a year. Yeah. And
with like weekly meetings, like we had like 2 to 3 hour weekly meetings with our designers, with our curator, following all sorts of tangents, which included like, can we 3D print a firework? How do you make a bronze sculpture of a firework? Like all these different things that we were trying to figure out so we could have objects that were representative of these forms of light.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Christy, for the question. We're going to go to Tilo, who has a question. Give Tilo a moment to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
I always liked watching fireworks, and I was always interested when they made shapes that we kind of knew. Like once in Calgary, at the Calgary Stampede, they had a firework that was the picture of the Canadian flag.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was cool. And then there was one, they also did a version of the head of the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So I always thought it was kind of interesting how they can make shapes like that and make the fireworks go off at that time.
Hey, Collin, can you provide any context as to how that happens?
I can. There's a couple of approaches they use. One is called a set piece, where you actually have a rigid backing framework, and that you have these like long strips or kind of thin tubes of pyrotechnical material, and that you can form a shape out of that. And so when it burns, you get that whole, you can spell a word, or you can have an image of a mountain, or a plane, or whatever it might be.
Wow.
A face.
Yeah, it stayed for a while. It was almost like a sparkler.
Yeah.
And then it was gone.
Yeah, and then you can see it. It holds its shape, its form, and then it goes out. There are other shells that are aerial shells. So these are being shot up in the air, and they're called ring patterns. And so you might get like a circle, or like a smiley face, or a heart shape.
Oh, yeah.
A star. And these are a little bit tricky, because those are a 2-dimensional shell burst. And if you can imagine that, you have one viewing angle, but they can't control how it's going to break up in the air. So you might get the smiley face, but the face is kind of looking to the side, so you only get that angle. So usually when you see those, they'll send up a bunch simultaneously, hoping that the audience gets one or two of them sort of with a straight on view so you can recognize what the shape
Yeah.
is.
I think one of my friends would have liked to hear or see this show, because his job he got in Japan is making fireworks, and now he goes around the country and shooting off these fireworks.
Fabulous. I think it's a craft that's taken quite seriously in Japan, from my understanding. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised anywhere in the world, because even from here, Vancouver, from different countries who do this, I always found it was amazing. And some of the buildings where we were, the sound sometimes it echoed, because it hit where the buildings were, and the buildings would hold it and then push it back, the sound, so it would echo on, from the beach and that. Yeah.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tilo.
You're welcome.
Lori's got a hand, and then we're going to go to Laura Bulk. Go ahead, Lori.
I'm already unmuted, I think.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm like Collin. I can see the light some, because I also have RP, and I like fireworks, and so this exhibit's very interesting how you put this together with the flowers and the fireworks and everything. Is this something that you wanted to do for a long time, to put this exhibit together?
Is it something I wanted to do for a long time?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, in a way, yes, because I remember having had conversations down at English Bay Beach with a mother-in-law of one of the pyrotechnicians who worked on setting up the display on the barge. And she was involved with a Lions Club. And she said, you know, boy, wouldn't it be neat if one day we had a way that we could invite kids with sight loss in to kind of get a better understanding of what these fireworks are like. And I would tell her about my ideas. And so we were actually able to do that because we had a special session that we hosted for Blind Beginnings, the organization in town for youth who are blind or with vision loss. And so they were able to come in and have a tour of the show.
And one thing too that I thought was really exciting about that Blind Beginnings visit too was that some people some young people that came to the show were also thinking about their art practices and wanting to develop an art practice as someone who was experiencing sight loss. And it was inspiring for them to see that accessibility, like art could be accessible, and that accessibility could be like pleasurable. Could be, you know, something that, you know, I guess that they could actually do. And I really appreciated that, being able to share the possibility for them to like develop their own practices, or at least, you know,
to dream about it.
Right.
I was in the space just anecdotally with some artists, and we were asking questions about why there aren't more folks with who are blind or partially sighted that are in the theater industry. And a few of them said to me, and this breaks my heart, but what they said to me was, I was told not to dream. Right? Like if you want to be in the arts, you're never going to, this comes from teachers and parents and mentors and whatever, when you're born with your disability, that being an artist is not something that's going to earn you a living, and you need to be able to sustain yourself and your disability as you grow. And so that meant they didn't have the opportunity to dream. So what you've done here as artists that live with your own visual or non-visual experience is offered our community members who are coming up behind us the opportunity to dream about maybe working in the arts. And I think that's a really beautiful gift. There's the holiday gift.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, I'd like to see this type of exhibit here in the States, because I don't live in Canada.
Yeah, Lori's joining us from California. So
I'd like to see something like this here in the States, where we could have an exhibit like this to show other people who are visually impaired that something like this can be done.
Okay,
and
Lori,
maybe this will be a touring show.
We should be in touch, because actually I worked with several pyrotechnicians from the States who were I was consulting with and conferring with about like, okay, the shape of this kind of a firework. We worked with Finale 3D. They were the designer of a software firework simulation program that we used to generate some of the core designs. Gabriel Miyashiro from Hawaii worked with me. Tom Calderwood from Tennessee, fireworks photographer, worked with me. Joe in San Diego, a pyrotechnician and pyrotechnical judge, gave me some critically useful information. So
It's great.
to be continued. Whole
To be
division.
continued.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Lori. So we're going to go to Laura, and then we're going to go to Richard, and that'll be the end of our speakers list. So Laura, you're up, my friend. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, good to run into you, friends. It's Laura. I'm joining from Masculine territory. And congratulations to you folks. I did get to go to the Grunt Gallery. And I think Amy just said it so beautifully as well. How this exhibit and all the work behind it and the development of it has really opened up space, I think, for dreaming. And yeah, so huge congratulations. Thank you for the countless hours of work that you folks have put into this. So I could talk with you, I'm sure, for hours about the development of it and the art side of it and the technical side of it. It's all so fascinating. I'll ask a couple questions and then let you run with it. So one was, I'm curious kind of what's next with this, whether it's to do with the exhibit itself, or maybe this exhibit has sparked another project or idea. And then my other question, and you can answer both, or depending on how much time we have. I'm also curious about some of the ways that this project and its development has, in your observation, impacted some of the experts you worked with. So whether the pyrotechnic folks or some the Grunt Gallery folks, and on and on. You worked with a lot of different people. And yeah, I'm curious about maybe some of the visual folks and what their experience was like and what they learned from this as well.
Wow, good questions. I've heard lots of feedback. I think for people who are sighted, I've heard that they are really kind of seeing fireworks in a different way than they ever have before. And some have said like, okay, now I really want to watch them live again, because this really sort of opens up a much better, deeper understanding of what they are and how they are. And so that's kind of interesting. I like that sort of turn that, okay, so here's someone, without eyesight, who does some work in collaboration with Carmen, who also has lost his eyesight, and now we're helping the sighted to see in a new way. And so that's a cool thing for me. The pyrotechnicians, I worked with several. There were 4 local pyrotechnicians who worked with me. Bill Renault from Mystical Fireworks, and the Sedman family from Celebration Fireworks, Brian Oberquill, an instructor here in town. And what we learned, and Sean, or Kelly Giles, sorry, from Archangel. And what I heard from them is they started to kind of see also, like, wrap their head around the words to describe the structure of the fireworks. They could recognize them, they knew them, but just the descriptive component, they realized like, oh my gosh, we've never really thought very clearly about this. And so that's kind of stirred them in to develop that kind of vocabulary. And there's some interest in doing that now that I've heard from the fields. And so what's next for me, number one about this project, I can't wait for it to be displayed again. And number 2, it's kind of sparked, and I appreciate your choice of words there, Laura, earlier. It sparked other work that came about in the context of this project. And so now I am learning pyrotechnical art design and choreography myself from the perspective of someone who has sight loss, but yet really cares about the art form. And I really do see this as an art form, and I want to learn how to design a fireworks show. And so I'm beginning that mentorship. I have my second mentoring class on Saturday morning with a pyrotechnician and a dance choreographer from Wisconsin. And then I'm doing another project to sort of take those ideas and begin to implement them in an actual sort of design script. And I'm working on a project where really delving into that sort of descriptive space of like, how can we describe these things? So lots on the go. I'm still kind of a psychologist, and now it looks like I'm also becoming a pyrotechnical arts designer.
Carmen, anything you'd like to add before we take our last question? And I'll ask you maybe just to keep it succinct.
Yeah, really quick. Yeah, so I would love for the show to be shown again. I am working with Whitney on another project about tactility at the Wellcome Trust in London, UK right now, with my mentor, who's a blind writer from UC Berkeley, Georgina Klieg, and a blind artist from Melbourne named Fan Devi. So we're working on that for opening in fall of next year. And I'm just along for the ride, trying to support Collin in whatever way I can so he can realize his dream. So yeah, thanks.
Friends and allies. Love it. Richard has a hand. So Richard, you'll be our final question for this evening, or comment. What do you want to share, Richard?
Comment. So I thank you. It was great presentation, and it's for lack of a better term, it's really eye-opening, especially coming from my perspective as a bit of a fireworks skeptic, because I haven't been able to visually enjoy it. But this is a really great alternative, and to me, it reminds me, your work is very. Reminds me very much of, and unfortunately the person passed away, but the woman that did the tactile colors in Victoria, and originally started out as an art project, and then turned it into other ways of looking at mapping technology as well too. So I think this is a great addition to that. It really makes fireworks more understandable for someone that's basically totally blind like myself. The other comment I had is, I think if you were going to go to the United States, this would be a perfect exhibit for either the NFB or ACB conventions, which are quite large gatherings of blind people. I think it would expose this to a lot of people all at once at one site. So I think that would be good. And then the question I had, and it's a bit late in the evening, but I was wondering if you could maybe briefly describe fingerworks for fireworks for those that maybe don't know what that was, because that's basically, I'm assuming, was the inspiration for this as well too.
Yeah, Collin, share with us your first experience, and again, I'll ask you to keep it succinct for us in this space. But what was it like? How did fingerworks for fireworks kind of manifest?
You know, it came about from my own desire to have a way that I could stay connected with the fireworks as I was losing my ability to see them. And so I was training friends to come down to English Bay with me. I would test them on vocabulary, help them understand what the different shapes were, what they're called, and they would do their best in words. And it was helpful, but it really wasn't until that one summer I went down first with my friend Mina, and then subsequent to that with Steph from VocalEye. And on both occasions I said, hey, they were describing something. I said, would you trace that out for me? You know, just using your fingers. And Steph traced out this clump or cluster of slowly descending stars on my forearm. And when she did it, it immediately conveyed so much more information that went way beyond what words ever could, because it told me about the configuration, the speed, and the relative kind of clustering of them. And so that was the beginning of Fingerworks for Fireworks. And it was over the course of that next year that the ideas got developed. We had some training workshops that were quite experimental. There was 4 of us from VocalEye that went down to the beach to give it a try, and we had describers with us, and it was amazing. It just opened up a whole new way to kind of reconnect with the art form. It's not the same as eyesight, but it's a way for meaningful engagement and participation. And so VocalEye has been helping to kind of organize these viewing sessions at English Bay for the Celebration of Light ever since.
Yeah, and what I really enjoy about it is being down on the beach itself. So first of all, we get the luxury, or we have in the last couple of years, I should say, but the luxury of having seating arranged for us, so you don't have to battle the crowds and try and find a spot on the beach. But you're smelling the salt air and the gunpowder in the air, and you're hearing the crowds murmur and ooh and ah as things go. Like there's this atmosphere that's also created that is really very social and very connective in a way, on top of just the viewing of the fireworks, right? So I get to sense all of those environmental things on top of that, which is really cool. Carmen, how about for yourself after being there? I know you touched a little bit on it, but
I agree. It's like a really relational experience. Like you're also getting to know your describer while you're waiting for the
one-on-one
display. Yeah, and like catching up with people you haven't seen in a while. And yeah, I think it really is about that, being on the beach with like a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people. Like it is a communal experience that you're participating in, and it's really powerful.
Yeah. I just, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank the two of you for being in the space and sharing Project Fireflower with us. Really, really interesting stuff. I know you're going to keep us informed of what happens next with this project, so we can let the community know. And you know, you're welcome back in the space anytime to share any other art forms or things that you're working on, because we totally invite that from our community in the space. So thanks both for joining us.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.